Have you wanted to play in a romantic fantasy world, be a group of knights protecting the kingdom from evil, explore the seas or vast plains, maybe delve into ancient ruins and arcane horrors? Perhaps you navigate a complicated political landscape, or just help folks by arranging marriages. Well, you can play all these and more in Blue Rose. And today I'm going to dive into my thoughts on this tabletop role-playing game from Green Ronin. Green Ronin sent us the Blue Rose core book to review, along with some of the supplemental books. But this video, we're going to be focusing on the core book. Let me know if you want to see any reviews of their other Blue Rose books. Before I get into the review, if you aren't familiar with the romantic fantasy genre, it is a sub-genre of fantasy fiction. Sometimes it does focus on romance, but it's kind of a little bit of a misleading name. Instead, it focuses on relationships, social, political, as well as romantic. The worlds of romantic fantasy tend to have societies that do not discriminate based on race, gender, or sexual identity. Magic tends to be innate abilities, and those who do seek it through studies often become corrupted as they're using magic for their own selfish pursuits. Many romantic fantasy worlds feature highly intelligent animals who live alongside humans, whether they have their own society, they are human companions, or divine creatures. You are less likely to find elves, dwarves, and non-human people in the genre, but some do exist. And all that to be said, romantic fantasy can have epic battles, struggles of finding one's place in the world, horrific monsters, and conflicts between countries or individuals who seek to overthrow the peaceful society. Like, you can have a world that doesn't have homophobia or sexism, but still have individuals who might have those perspectives and want to change things. And then you can have conflict by trying to stop them from changing things to be worse. And a lot of the stories in romantic fantasy focus on a main character, but they almost always have a group of friends or colleagues who they adventure along with together. They find their place kind of within this society. So that makes it perfect for tabletop role-playing games where you are playing as a group. Some examples of romantic fantasy are Mercedes Lackey's Valdemar series, Tamora Pierce's Song of the Lioness, and I'd even argue that The Princess Bride fits into romantic fantasy genre. Blue Rose even has a couple of special social stunts that reference the movie and book. Okay, so now that we've gone over what romantic fantasy is, what is Blue Rose? It's a setting and rulebook to play in a romantic fantasy tabletop role-playing game. The world of Aldea is rich and has a lot to explore. It feels very much like kind of our Renaissance and Age of Sails era, but has some comforts and kind of modern-ish amenities thanks to the magic that exists in the world. You know, magic items that can turn light on and provide heat and cooling, all those fun things. It is a more liberal society than our own. Individuals of all races, genders, and sexual preferences are treated equally. But there is plenty of room for conflict, as there is a corruption known as the Shadow that threatens the world, particularly in Kern, a neighboring country under the control of a Lich King, some of whose citizens are fleeing into Aldis, which is kind of the main country. So within the setting, you get a good overview of the 8 different kingdoms and societies within the world. The details go deep as well as broad, so it allows the structure to understand the world, but gives you room to fill in your own details. And reading through these different places really reminded me of the different countries and locations in a lot of fantasy settings and romantic fantasy. You have kind of a plains area, you've got seas, you've got mountains, as well as a variety of different kingdoms and societies, some that might lean more like traditionally good and some leaning traditionally evil, and then, nomadic societies as well as ones run by kings, more diplomatic societies. There's a nice mix in this world. The artwork within this book conveys the feel of the game really well. At times it feels very much like I'm looking at like medieval and Renaissance tapestries. It captures the diversity of the setting and provides a nice little inspiration for players and game masters of, cool magic items or locations that you could set parts of your game in. The book is broken down into 3 main sections: the player section, the world of Aldea, and the narrator section, which also includes an introductory adventure. For players building a character, you pick one of 3 classes: a warrior, arcane, or expert. Now, this may seem like not a lot of variety, but there are a bunch of specialities, some within a specific class and others that work for multiple classes. These provide a lot of variety, as well as you can gain multiple specialities as you level up to really customize your character. There are 5 races in Blue Rose, humans being the most common, but there are also the night people, which feels very similar to kind of fantasy orcs. The sea folk, which are an aquatic humanoid race. The Vata, individuals who are touched by the arcane. Their DNA can be passed down for many generations in humans and kind of pop up unexpectedly. So that's an interesting thing. And the Raiden, which are the intelligent animals. And like most of the rest of the age rule books, there are also rules for playing a mixed heritage character. I want to take a moment and thank all of our patrons, especially Tucker. You want to support our channel, you can head on over to patreon.com/rollforinitiative and check out the perks of being a patron. Blue Rose uses the age system, and like Green Ronin's other age books, this is a great book for both beginners and experienced players, as it lays out everything you need to know about tabletop role-playing games and is very enjoyable to read. And for experienced players, you can kind of skim over and get to the unique aspects of Blue Rose and kind of skim over some of that, like, what is a tabletop role-playing game? How do you role-play? What is a skill check? Those things are pretty easy to jump over and get to the meat of the system. We've talked about the age system more in depth in our Fantasy Age review. You can go check that out after you're done here. The core of it is that you have 9 attributes. Those, along with the skill bonuses, are added to the results of rolling 3d6 to determine how you achieve things. Where the system really shines is the stunt mechanic. Rolling doubles on any of the 3 dice allow you to use combat, exploration, or social stunts based on what you are trying to accomplish, and also based on how many points you got. And these stunts add a lot of variety and interest to the game, as well as some really cool cinematic moments. And while the age system really excels at combat, Green Ronin has expanded it in Blue Rose to include a really robust social mechanic that will support a wide range of themes in your game. There is a social ranking system that can provide additional points to use for social stunts with specific people that you have a stronger social bond with, whether that be positive or negative, as well as 2 special social stunts you can kind of really only unlock with somebody who is really either a good friend or a hated enemy. I also like the addition of the conviction mechanic to the age system. It provides a mechanism by which the player characters are capable of kind of more heroic moments. Conviction points can be spent to do things like make a reroll, get an additional action, heal, stabilize a dying character, and counteract corruption points. More on corruption in a moment. They are limited, and they don't automatically renew, so it's not going to break the game. There are more opportunities for the player characters to have conviction and really need something to happen, or really need to not die in this moment. So speaking of corruption, if you come into contact with corrupt places, items, or you're using sorcery, or you perform evil acts, including following your fate, more on that in a moment, you can slowly become corrupt yourself and lose yourself to the shadow. Mechanically, corruption is a penalty to your constitution and willpower, and it's not easy to lower your corruption score. This is a mechanic that is going to encourage to be the good guys and the good heroes, which falls into the romantic fantasy genre. They are stories about the good guys, not stories about the evil folks. Additionally, as part of character creation, you select a calling. That's pretty self-explanatory, as well as your destiny and fate. Destiny is basically your best self, while fate is you at your worst. So you could be courageous or cowardly, practical or deluded, merry or dour, just to name a few. You can choose these as part of character creation or draw a card to randomly select your calling as well as your destiny and fate. The calling I really like. It helps provide a little bit more of a like, why is your character adventuring? What is it that they're doing? You can also have a goal separate from your calling, which I like that because that might provide you more of a short-term thing. And then the destiny fate is just a nice kind of guide to how your character acts and a guide for role playing, and then something that the GM can kind of reward or use those corruption points if you are, following your character along. The magic mechanics are pretty easy to understand. Most are innate abilities, but there's a variety of kinds of abilities and flavors of magic. So you're going to have combat as well as more utility magic, kind of for all kinds of situations. I especially like that there's a strain mechanic. Some spells and abilities can be harder and take more of a toll or have a risk of taking more of a toll. These kinds of mechanics I find work really great as it allows players to use higher magic if they want to, but know that there is a risk that is probably going to prevent them from just, using that all the time. And especially if they do become strained, they're not going to do as well. Within the narrator section, narrator is the Blue Rose term for game master. There is advice for role-playing social encounters, including some great advice on handling romance with a variety of kinds of players. Like, this section is great to read, even if you aren't playing Blue Rose, just to know for how do I role-play social stuff. Great advice. I also appreciate that there's a section on problem players that provides guidance on how to navigate helping players who aren't fitting with the vibe of the game or the table. It's not everybody's going to instantly fit in, and there are ways that you can help somebody so they stop being a problem player. The narrator section also includes a number of series style and framework examples. I kind of wish the series style was in the beginning of the book to encourage players to also read these, as this goes over what kind of game will be run and shows the variety of styles Blue Rose supports. You can run a typical high fantasy game, or maybe play a swashbuckling campaign. You can have a horror and dark fantasy work in the game, and of course, romance and political storylines. The series framework is really great for the narrator as it provides guidance on how to build a campaign in some of these styles and with different storylines. A Game of Thorns is great if you want to play a political intrigue game. I'll give you a hint at what book series that's inspired by. And within this section, it outlines factions you may choose to focus on, and these factions are fleshed out more in the World of Aldea section. You can play a coming-of-age story, travel the land as knights, exploring and helping those in need, look into ancient artifacts and horrors, or be a troupe of wedding planners. And each of these sections kind of has some advice on areas of the kind of setting to focus on, as well as kind of themes or ways to structure the arc of the campaign. Overall, Blue Rose feels like a system and setting that is going to support such a wide range of stories. And if you love cozy fantasy, I think you could really easily create a game in this system. I think it's not going to work great for a classic dungeon crawl or hack and slash. You could do it, not as great. But if you're looking for something that is going to focus a lot more on various relationships and still support combat and exploration, I highly suggest you check out Blue Rose by Green Ronin. So what about you? Have you picked up or played Blue Rose ever? What do you think? I'd love to know your thoughts down in the comments below. And do you read, watch, listen to, audiobooks, any romantic fantasy books. I love them. I have so many on our bookshelves because that is all I read as a teenager. And I'd love to find some new books. So yeah, also, if you have any suggestions of books in that genre, comments, leave them for me. I would love that. Okay. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Roll for Initiative. Bye! Of some of these other Blue Rose books. I'm holding it backwards. I didn't wake the baby. Thank God.